Some truths aren't just uncomfortable, they can be downright terrifying. Today, we're going to dive into one of the 20th century's most chilling philosophical insights, Hannah Arendt's concept of the banality of evil. Okay, so picture this. It's 1961 in Jerusalem. The world is glued to the trial of Adolf Eichmann, a high-ranking Nazi official. Everyone, and I mean everyone, expected to see a monster in the flesh, a cold, calculating, evil genius. But the man who actually took the stand, he was different. He seemed almost squeamish, kind of bland. He sounded more like a boring middle manager obsessed with his paperwork than some sadistic mastermind. And yet, this was the guy. This was the dull bureaucrat who was responsible for organizing the transport of over 1.5 million European Jews to their deaths in ghettos and concentration camps. So, how do you square that circle? How could someone so ordinary be responsible for evil on such an extraordinary scale? Now, this shocking disconnect wasn't lost on anybody, but for one philosopher who was there reporting on the trial, a woman named Hannah Arendt, this puzzle was more than just confusing. It was the key to a truly terrifying revelation about the modern world. So, to solve the puzzle of this desk murderer, Arendt had to look a lot deeper. She started to realize the answer wasn't just about Eichmann's personal psychology, it was about the very structure of modern society, a conclusion that was shaped by her own harrowing experiences. And for Arendt, this wasn't some abstract academic exercise. It was deeply, deeply personal. As a German Jew, she was actually imprisoned in 1933 before being forced to flee her own country. Her experience as a refugee lit a fire in her, fueling a lifelong obsession with one fundamental question. How could something like this have possibly happened? And from that question, she began to form an answer, one that would challenge the very foundations of how we think about good, evil, and the world we've built for ourselves. You see, Arendt totally broke from the crowd. At the time, the common wisdom was that the Nazis were a historical fluke, some kind of perfect storm that was totally unique to Germany. But Arendt? No. She saw something far more universal and way more troubling. She argued that the seeds of this horror weren't just German. They were a dangerous byproduct of modern industrial society itself. Now, to really get what she's saying, we need to take a quick look at her theory of the human condition. It's actually a super powerful lens for looking at our own world, too. Arendt basically said human life has 3 core activities. First, there's labor. That's the stuff we do just to survive, to meet our basic needs. Then there's work. That's the act of actually building the world around us, everything from bridges to pieces of art. But for Arendt, the most important activity, the one that makes us truly human, was action. This is the political stuff where we engage with each other in public, debate our shared values, and collectively shape the world we want to live in. And here's the kicker, the real heart of her argument. Arendt believed that modern life, with its constant, relentless focus on economic growth and just consuming things, was systematically destroying the space for that life of action. She saw modernity as creating this profound sense of isolation. When a society starts to see people mainly as producers and consumers, judging us by our economic value, it kind of strips us of our political and moral identities. We get disconnected from our neighbors, and maybe even from our own sense of who we are. We become lonely. And that lonely state, that's dangerous. In her massive book, The Origins of Totalitarianism, Arendt argued that these isolated, lonely individuals become the perfect fertile ground for totalitarian movements. Why? Well, because these regimes offer a twisted sense of purpose, a powerful identity, a place to belong for people who feel like they've lost everything else. Which brings us right back to Adolf Eichmann, sitting in his glass booth. Arendt now had the framework to understand him, and her conclusion was nothing short of revolutionary. Now, let's be super clear. While she absolutely condemned his monstrous actions, Arendt saw no evidence that Eichmann himself was some kind of monster. He was, in her words, a distinctly ordinary man. His main motivation wasn't deep-seated hatred or sadism. It was this weird desire to just be a good employee, to do his job well, to follow orders to the letter. And for Arendt, that was the most terrifying thing of all. She called this phenomenon the banality of evil. And that word, banality, doesn't mean evil is boring or trivial. It means evil can be ordinary, commonplace. It's the evil that happens when regular people just accept their role in a destructive system without ever stopping to think, to engage in a critical internal conversation about what they are actually doing. So, if the problem is this profound thoughtlessness, then what in the world is the solution? For Arendt, the antidote was as simple as it was powerful. And suddenly, this isn't just a historical question about the past anymore, is it? It's a question for every single one of us right here, right now. What is our defense against this quiet, creeping kind of evil? Arendt's answer was beautifully simple: thinking. Now, she didn't just mean daydreaming. She meant an active, internal conversation with yourself. The kind of real thinking where you question your own actions, where you confront moral problems head on. And this is precisely why she held Eichmann responsible. His crime wasn't just what he did, but his fundamental failure to think.
But here's the thing. This kind of thinking doesn't just happen in a vacuum. Arendt argued that we have to actively create spaces for it, forums where we can actually practice that life of action. And this could be anything, really, from town hall meetings and student unions to self-governing workplaces, any space, big or small, where open dialogue and critical self-reflection are actually valued.
And that leaves us with a final and pretty urgent question. I mean, Arendt was worried about the isolating forces of modernity back in the 1950s. What would she say about our world today? A world of constant connection, but also maybe unprecedented distraction and alienation. In this world, where do we find the space and maybe more importantly, the courage to truly think?